Oh, hello everyone. I'm Thomas Bradley. Now perhaps you already know that I was a storekeep, grocery store, and I was a baker. And I was born in England, and I married my wife Sophie over there, and then we decided to immigrate to the Americas. Came out here in 1856 that is, and ultimately settled in Chagrin Falls. Now I opened a store at the corner of Orange Street and Main, right across from the Union House Hotel. And I sold, made bread, and I made all kinds of English delicacies. Oh, they loved these things. People came from miles around, and I had so many customers that I actually had to move my store to get more room. So I moved down the street a couple of blocks. And then in the store, I noticed that lots of my people there, the customers, were from England. And if you know anything about the English, you know they like their pubs. So I set up in the store a beer pub. And this could be for anybody who wanted to come to the store, sit quietly, talk to their neighbors, have a pint, and be quiet. We were quite a respectable operation here. We were quiet, never had a problem. It was great. Till one day, unfortunately, on my doorstep, we found a gaggle of females. Now these females were saying alcohol is the devil's brew, and they were going to stamp it out. No more drinking alcohol in this town. They called themselves temperance workers, whatever that meant. And you know, I think that this Elora Gates, she was probably a ringleader in this group. Well, they sat down on my doorstep, blocking the entrance, and they proceeded to put on a performance. Oh, it was wonderful. I heard speeches, I heard praying, I heard songs, and I even heard a little bit of doggerel poetry. Some of the townsfolk, however, took umbrage at all of this and decided it wasn't worth it, and they threw eggs at them. The women picked it up. They were very calm and quiet. They went down to the Irving House Hotel and they performed again. This created quite a stir in the community. Quite a stir. It actually made the local paper, and somebody had taken a picture of these women and put it in the paper. Now, from my point of view, this was unfortunate because the patronage in my beer pub dropped off so rapidly that I lost that income. But fortunately, I had another source of income in my grocery store. You see, what I had done was I had purchased an acre or so of ground on the south end of town, and it was bordered by a stream that was year-round, and I used the water in that stream to water my garden. I had a market garden there, and the vegetables I took over to the grocery store, and I sold them in the grocery store. And everything went along fine. I had that other income, no problem. Till one day again, trouble rolled up on my doorstep, and this time it was in the form of my downstream neighbor. His name was Delaville Finkel. Well, in 1887, February, I believe it was, it rained, and the rain and the snow melt caused that stream to overflow its banks. And it flooded some of my property. Worse, however, it flooded some of Delaville's property. And he did not like it. So what he did was he built a dam, took a shovel and started throwing dirt. Well, that water he backed up came out onto my property. And of course I didn't like that either. So I went to him and I asked if he would stop. And he said, in four-letter words, no, he would not. Well, I'm sitting there thinking, what am I going to do about this now? And the next thing I knew, I woke up in bed with a splitting headache. I found out later what had happened. Finkel had decided to hit me in the head with that shovel, laid me out cold. And my son came over, tried to interfere, and Finkel decided to take the shovel to him too, cut him up pretty badly, laid him out cold too. And then he walked off. Well, a couple of neighbors found us, took us home. And it took a time, but we both recovered. And then we went back to work. Well, a few years later, I didn't feel real well, and I thought things were coming to an end. So I decided to write my will. I took care of Sophie over here, my children over there, and then I gave the store to my son Hector, who was trying to protect me, on the condition that he take care of his mother. He did. Well, pneumonia caught me, and that was the end. But you know, there's still something that kind of bothers me. I've never understood this Finkel operation. Finkel was never charged with criminal activity. He didn't get attempted murder. He didn't get assault and battery. And even worse, it never showed up in the paper, the local papers, anywhere. I looked, it was not there. Now that I think about it, you know, if you folks will excuse me, I'm going to go and try and find the editor and ask him what happened.
I am Elora Gates. How nice to see all of you this afternoon. I was born in 1840 in nearby Newberry, but I soon came to the High Falls with my parents, Stephen and Talatzi Gardner Cutler. My grandfather was A.C. Gardner. He was a landowner in the village. He also ran the grist mill at the High Falls. He owned all of the land across the street from the cemetery. My uncle was a B. Gardner. Now, he married Sarah White, the daughter of Hervey White of Whitesburg, thus uniting two very important families in the village. Now, my James Gates was not of the Gates Mills family, but rather from nearby Parkman. He was in the dry goods business. My heart was so saddened when my James went off to the Civil War, but filled with joy when he returned. We married in 1866, and we had 5 children, 2 boys and 3 girls. Actually, my son Fred became the mayor of the village in 1902, and my other son was a rather prominent lawyer in Cleveland. Well, James and I built our lovely house in 1873 up on the hill on Washington Street. Actually, it's a good thing I enjoyed children because the school, Chagrin Falls School, was right behind us. I could hear the children playing at recess, and I so enjoyed that. In 1897, the Interurban, the electric railroad, came to town. It went right in front of our house, up and down. Such a dirty, noisy thing. and especially when the county fair was going. The county fair was just up the hill from us. Well, a body could hardly get a clean laundry off the line between all the soot and smoke in the village and that dirty, smoky, dusty thing coming from that railroad. Well, my James was rather prominent in town. He had a dry goods store. He was also on the school board, and he also was the superintendent at the Methodist Church on South Franklin Street. I myself got involved in the Temperance Crusade. You know the Temperance Crusade, the Anti-Alcohol League? It came through in 1874. I joined with 40 other women of the Congregational Church, and we picketed and prayed all across town. Well, we had to, you know. There were 9 saloons. Well, there we were, kneeling on the boardwalk in front of the Eggleston Hotel, picketing and praying to get drunkards' souls. Do you know what those men did? They threw eggs at us. They called us names. They cursed us. But we prevailed. And later on, the Irving House Hotel was run on the temperance plan. In 1880, the Women's Crusade published a book called Nursery Rhymes for the Children of the Crusade. For example, cock-a-doodle-doo, what is the leg to do? Work at the polls for drunkard souls, alas, and get them too. Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Her mother denied her wine, beer, and cider, and so she's alive to this day. Now, I just want to say one word, or maybe a few, about my friend, Tom Bradley. Tom is a fine English gentleman, I'm sure, but I don't hold with his ideas about ale and other spirits. You know, not everyone can stop at one drink. And then all the money that they've earned in the mills has gone to alcohol, and the wives and children are left at home starving. Well, I do have some pledge cards with me, if you'd like to sign the pledge against drinking alcohol. Here, sir. Thank you. And before I leave you all, I'd like to sing one song having to do with the temperance movement. We ladies sang it often, and perhaps you'll join me in the second chorus. Away, away with rum by gum, with rum by gum, with rum by gum. Away, away with rum by gum. The song of the temperance movement. Ready? Away, away with rum by gum, with rum by gum, with rum by gum. Away, away with rum by gum. The song of the temperance movement. Thank you all for visiting this afternoon. I certainly enjoyed it.
I didn't know I had people here. Welcome. Come on in closer. I would like you to see my name. I am Sarah Hubble Hayden at Hayden, and look at this right here. Please come in and see it. I was born in Bedford, Ohio in 1829, and then when I was 19 years old, I was the wife of David Hayden. This is, you will see the Hayden name. And David is David is right here, my beloved David. David and I had 2 children. We had Will a year after we were married, and then 2 years after that we had little David. And we were so in love. And we lived right up yonder, right up over the hill there. If you want to come in and see this, you're welcome too. But we lived right up over the hill in the family farm with Elder Hayden. And let me tell you about Elder Hayden. He was a preacher, and he preached with the Disciples of Christ Church. And he preached for 35 long years. He was everywhere. And he did maybe 300 sermons a year. We were always going to a meeting. But he was gone so much of the time. He would get on a horse, on the back of a horse, and they say that Elder Hayden traveled 90,000 miles, imagine, on the back of a horse. He was everywhere. He even went up to Canada, and he just welcomed us into his home. It was lovely. And then my husband David, that you just saw, we had so much fun, but he became a sickly man. He had a chronic disease, so he was gone all the time. He was going to get therapy. Back in the day, we called it hydrotherapy, and they would take a great big old vat of ice cold water and put him in and try to leach out everything to make him well. He'd come home, and for maybe a week, 2 days after he was home, he felt well. He thought he was cured. I knew better, and he wasn't cured. It was chronic. It was chronic. But I tell you about them because they were traveling all the time. And I was at home with little Will and little David and my mother-in-law. Now, I would like to tell you something nice about my mother-in-law, but I don't have anything to tell you. She was despicable. She was so it's hard to say, but she was terrible to me. She couldn't say a nice word to me at all. And I'd walk around because she made it clear that I was only there because she let me. And I'd walk around with this heavy cloud, I could put my dusting cloth down, over my head of just doom and gloom and woe is me. And I'm there taking care of little children. It was so hard being with Mary. But then my husband comes home and he's even sicker than he was before. So I'm taking care of my husband, taking care of Will, taking care of little David. It was very hard being me back then. And then it happened. Oh, the worst thing happened. The world fell down. My husband David died. He was the love of my life. And do you know, I could not visit his gravesite for maybe 8 months after he died. And as was the practice back then, he was buried in the backyard. I could see him out the back window, but I couldn't even go near the back window. So finally we got this wonderful cemetery, and Elder Hayden and David were brought over here, much better than the backyard. But there I was, and I'm thinking, nobody's here for me, and I've got two little children, and I'm gonna be a strong woman and not be so downtrodden. I took my valises, I took a child on each hand, and I went to my mother's in Bedford, Ohio. Do you know how far Bedford, Ohio is from here? It's like at least 4 hours for us to get there. And I go to my mother's house, and she welcomed us with open arms and wanted us to, she loved us being, what a difference, I'll tell you. She loved that we were there. So we played, the children played, and my mother said, you know, you need to get a degree, go back to school, and boy did I ever. I went to college and I got me a teaching degree, and I taught in Bedford schools for years. I'm so proud of myself. No more cloud over my head. I did so well doing this. The world opened up for me. And then young Will was no longer young, and he moved to Iowa with his new bride, but he didn't leave me. He said, come on and bring little David. We moved to Iowa, and I taught school there too. Life had happened again. Life was good because I persevered. And I just kept going. And I'm so proud to say that. And this is why I come up and I dust this off, because look at me. I persevered and I prevailed. If you notice, nobody else's name jumps out at you like this. So please come by and visit my tombstone and dust it off when you go by, okay? I love seeing it. Thank you for coming by.
Good afternoon. I am Jane Elizabeth Church. I was born in Massachusetts in 1833 and came with my father, Henry Church Sr., and my mother, Clarissa Church, to this place in 1834. It took 21 days to get here. First, we drove a wagon to New York, and then we took a canal boat on the Erie Canal to Buffalo, and then a steamship from Buffalo to Cleveland, and finally a team of oxen brought us to the High Falls. Oh, there was not much here when we arrived. We did not even have a place to live. Mr. Graves had told Father that there would be a house. We had to sleep in a barn at the bottom of Grove Hill until Father could build a house for us. Father was a blacksmith, and he had been here the year before, and when he saw the river and realized the power the river could provide for industry, decided this was where he wanted to raise his family. He built a house first on the south side of the river on what is now North Franklin Street. That house was later moved to a different part of Chagrin Falls, and we later moved to a house that he built on the north side of the river on West Orange Street, and his blacksmith shop was there as well. I was the oldest one of the family who was raised here. Oh, I had a half-sister, Jerusha, but she only lived here for a while and then moved back to Massachusetts. My brother, Henry Jr., was a blacksmith and an artist. The townspeople always considered Henry a bit eccentric, but he was a wonderful artist. He carved that magnificent lion that you see on top of his grave. Brother Royal was also a blacksmith, as was Brother Austin. Austin fought in the Civil War as a squirrel hunter and 100 days man. After his 100 days, he caught camp fever, and when he came home, our little sister Flora was only 12, and she came down with the fever. Austin never forgave himself for Flora's death. And then there was my sister Clara, who married Frank Hunt of this place and lived in a nice house right down Franklin Street. As the years went on and I grew older, the harsh winters here in Chagrin Falls began to take their toll on me. So I would spend my winters in Redlands, California with Royal, Austin, Clara, and their families. Eventually we all moved there. But I came back home to rest with Father, Mother, Henry, and Flora in 1917. I was the only one of the family who never married or had children. I guess if I'm to be remembered for anything, it is my work with the Chagrin Falls Soldiers' Aid Society, which we women of the village began in 1861. Oh, not everyone in the village supported the Union during the war, but most of them did. You could say we were an abolitionist town before the war. Father was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and there were others from the village as well. We always knew when there were fugitive slaves seeking shelter in our home because we children had less to eat for dinner. That went on for several years. I was always a committed abolitionist and known as a woman of definite opinions, too. After the War of the Rebellion, I began a collection to raise money to build the beautiful white monument that you see over there to honor those sons and brothers and husbands from this place who fought and died in that terrible war. Not without a bit of controversy, mind you. You see, I managed to have Brother Austin's name engraved on that monument, even though he survived the war. Oh, that caused quite the uproar, I can tell you. But I did not care. Well, it's getting late and I must be going. Thank you for stopping by.
Welcome. Thank you for stopping by and seeing me. My name's Henry Church Jr. I was born here in Chagrin Falls in 1836. I was one of the first children born in Chagrin Falls. My father, Henry, and my mother, Clarissa, moved here in 1834. They were one of the first families in Chagrin Falls. You see, they were good friends of Noah Gray's, who founded Chagrin in 1833, and they came here to start a new life. Now, my father, he was a strong man, and he was a blacksmith by trade. And he taught me how to be a blacksmith, and he taught my brothers, Royal and Austin, to be blacksmiths also. Times were tough when we were young. I attended school here in little one-room schoolhouses that dotted around the area. There was one on Maple Street, one on Cottage Street and School Lane. Even drew pictures of them. I think they're still around in my house somewhere. But as soon as I was big enough to go to work in the blacksmith shop, I had to go to work to help support the family. But I did learn enough in school to know that I love reading and I love learning about the world around me. I pride myself that I've been able to teach myself many different skills and trades all on my own. I love to draw, and I love to create things out of wood, metal, stone. As I got older, I started to love to paint. I love painting. I love the smell of paint. I could just swim in that. I painted landscapes, I painted murals, painted portraits. You name it, I'll paint it. I tried to learn from looking at the masters and studying their techniques and their different styles. For a while there, I was even a friend of Archibald Willard, whom you might remember painted The Spirit of '76. And he taught me many things. Now, I'm a spiritualist, and I think it's so wonderful that we don't die. We just shed our bodies like a corn husk or a chestnut burr. And I truly, truly believe that the spirits are with me whenever I create something. When I was young, I was walking along the river one day and I came across an Indian family. And they were there by the river. And that memory has stayed with me all these years, and I knew that I would go back to that same place in the river and create something. Well, it wasn't until I got into my late 40s that I started leaving my blacksmith shop a little early each day to go down to that spot by the river. Now, that wasn't an easy walk. You see, my blacksmith shop was at the corner of Franklin Street and Pearl, and it was a 2-mile walk from there down to that spot by the river. And many times I had to come home with this lantern to find my way back in the dark because there were no roads, just paths and trees. You see, what I wanted to do was create the story of the Indians that used to live in this valley, and how the white man had come in and pushed them off to the west. And I really believe that the spirit of that Indian family was in my hands as I started to carve into that stone. What I wanted to do was something in secret, so that when people came to this spot in the future, they'd see this great big creation. They go, well, how did that get there? Who made this? What's that trying to tell me? But unfortunately, a couple fishermen caught me carving there one day, and being the gossips that they are, they went down to town and said, old Henry's carving a rock down by the river. So people started coming down and watching me carve. And my dreams of doing it in secret were lost, and I have to tell you, I was sorely disappointed. For a while, I even stopped carving. But eventually I went back there and finished the side that told the story about the Indians, because I thought that was a very important story to tell. Now, I'm what's known as a character. They've written articles about me in newspapers and say I'm a genius and a remarkable man, but they say I'm eccentric. I'll give you an example. We thought it'd be a good idea with Blakesley, Upham, and a few others and myself. We'd go down to Bentley's old mill. You see, they had these great big granite gristmill stones lying in the river there that weren't being used anymore. We thought they'd be a great addition for the new Triangle Park that we just created. So we went down there and we hauled those big rocks back to town. J.W. Williams, who was the park commissioner, said, "You're not putting those dirty old rocks in a brand new park." So Blakesley, he put his in his backyard. Me, I put mine right in front of my blacksmith shop. You know, the one at the corner of Pearl and Franklin Street, across the street from Triangle Park, where everybody could see it every day. And this sculpture here, this is the Lion and the Lamb from the book of Isaiah in the Bible. I carved this to be my tombstone. But the powers that be got wind of it and said, "Henry, you can't put that in the cemetery. It's so much different than all the other monuments." So I said, fine. Put it in my front yard, right next to my blacksmith shop. You know, the one right next to Triangle Park, where everybody could see it every day. And I said, this is going to sit here until the day I die, and by God, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. Well, the powers that be finally came around to my way of thinking and said, "Henry, go ahead and put it in the cemetery." And we drove it up here, and I even had my picture taken with it. You see, I like to get the last word. A friend of mine, George Flores, had one of those newfangled Thomas Edison recording devices. You know, the wax cylinder ones. And I thought that'd be a great idea to record my own eulogy. And that gave me a chance to share my views on life and my views on spirituality. And I remember how I ended that eulogy so many years ago. I said, "We'll now have some music. Afterwards, we'll retire to the cemetery. Goodbye, a present. And thank you, George Flores. And thank you all for coming. I very appreciate you coming here, and Be sure to look for my spirit as you go through Chagrin and the surrounding areas. My name is Martin Bentley. I was born in 1823 in Warren, Ohio. My father was Adamson Bentley. He was a disciples pastor. And in 1831, he purchased a large tract of land right where the two branches of the Chagrin River merge and the river flows on up to Lake Erie. And it was his idea that he wanted to start a community there. And he did. One of the other families that was in the area was the Kent family. And we did a lot of different kinds of things with the Kent family. And one of the pleasures of the Kent family was a young lady by the name of Huldah. Now, Huldah and I started sparking pretty young. And by the time we were 21 in 1844, we were married. We had two boys right quick and had a good life going, but I wanted to get out from underneath my father. He was a great man, strong reputation, but I wanted to start my own life. So I took Huldah and the boys and we went off to Illinois. And we started there and had a nice farm there and things were going good. And then something amazing happened. Gold. Gold. They found gold in California. I mean, you could go out to California and dig up some dirt. Everybody was getting rich. Everybody. I went and got a couple of my friends and said, let's go. And we did. We left in 49 and headed to California. We darn near walked, but we made it there. And while we were there, we made enough to get by, but we never struck it rich. It was always out there in front of us, thinking the next time we dig a hole, the next time we go in, we're going to be rich. But it never happened. Finally, in 1852, I got this letter from my father. You can see just about how he wrote here, the anguish he was feeling. He says, Martin, you need to come home. See, Huldah and the boys had moved back and were living with him, and he was taking care of them. He said, your brother Stauden's died. Your sister Lucretia has died. I've entered their names in the Bible. We need you to come home. Lucretia missed you. Your wife Huldah misses you. Come home. My sister even wrote in the margins, that little writing there in the margin. Well, I just couldn't give up that dream. I took this letter and put it back in my pocket. It was another 4 years before I got home. 4 years chasing that dream. When I got home, Father was getting a little elderly, so I took over the farm, and things were going along all right. And Huldah and I had a couple more children, girls this time, to add to the boys, and then something else happened. The war broke out. Now, I wanted to go fight. I mean, Chagrin Falls was very much an abolitionist community, and I wanted to go and be a part of that, take care of those rebels, end that war quickly. But Father and Huldah, they said, Martin, you're 40 years old. Let the boys do it. Let the boys go out and do it. You stay home, you stay with your children, you take care of Huldah. It was hard. It was hard. Many Chagrin boys went off. And everyone that left kind of tore at my heart because I wanted to go. Finally, in 1863, the war was still going on, and I decided I had to go. So there was a new unit starting up, the 125th Ohio Volunteer Infantry. I signed up to be part of that unit. First place we went to was Chickamauga. Now that was one terrible battle. Many Union boys lost their lives there. Our unit stood strong. We developed a reputation for gallantry. We went on and fought our way across Georgia. We participated in the siege of Atlanta. We were involved in Sherman's March to the Sea. And then the war was over and I came home. During the time I was gone, Father died. So now I own all this beautiful property. And so I became a farmer. And that's what I did for about the next 10, 12 years. I was involved in the community. I was a part of this business group or men's group. I was a mason. You know, all of those things that you do. But I just didn't really like farming. So I finally, as my eyes started to deteriorate, I got these cataracts and I couldn't see. I was near blind. So I put the farm up for sale in 1877. And I had cataract surgery and that helped a bit. But then in 1879, Huldah died. This woman here who had taken care of my children, who had waited for me 7 years when I was in California, 2 years when I was in the Army, raised the children, she was gone. It kind of took my heart out. I just didn't want to go back to the farm. It turned out that one of her brothers bought our farm. And so I went to live with my son Benjamin up on Bell Street here in Chagrin Falls. And then I spent the rest of my life traveling from one son's house to my daughter's house, to another daughter's house, and back to another son's house. I spent all that time with my children and all that time with my grandchildren. I guess I knew that when I was young, my children didn't have their father around. So I wanted to play a role in the lives of my children as they got older and their grandchildren. And I hope that somewhere Huldah knows that I've done the best I can for all of our children. Thank you for coming.
Hello. Thank you for coming to visit me. My given name is Sarah, but everyone has always called me Sally. I was born in 1803 in the parish of Langtree, Devon, England. My father, Philip Stoneman, owned a large farm. His first wife died in childbirth with their third child, and I was born to his second wife. I was one of 6 daughters. He only had one son, quite outnumbered. So, our neighbors were also farmers, John Whitlock and John Hutchings. Well, in 1823, I married the son of John Whitlock, Richard. 2 of my sisters also married Whitlock boys. The next year, we welcomed our first daughter, Elizabeth. And over the next 20 years, we had 11 more children. Things were good, but between running a farm and raising 12 children, life was hard. Especially since many of our neighbors, people we'd known all of our lives, started to move across the ocean to a place in America called Ohio. Now, I'd heard of New Jersey and New York and Massachusetts and all of the places, but I'd never heard of Ohio before. But still, 200 people from Devon moved to the Chagrin area. And they gave us all of their good news about their success and their fortune, about being able to buy land and build houses and found businesses. Well, in 1851, Richard and I decided that we would go too. We were able to buy land in Russell, just 2 miles from here. Sadly, only 5 years after we had arrived, Richard passed on. But still, life went on, and our family began to build roots in Chagrin. My daughter Grace married Joseph Stoneman, and my daughter Fanny married William Brond. And them, along with my son Elias, got involved in the hardware business, right there on Main Street. And the bricks for that building, along with many of the houses, including the one my son Elias built on Orange Street and the house Grace and her husband built, were all built from bricks that my nephew, William Hutchings, or as we called him, Boss Hutchings, made in his kiln. Life was looking bright again. But then, Elias took ill with diphtheria and died. I had closed in death the eyes of my husband and 7 of my children. And I tried to find solace where I could, in my family, in my community, in the congregation of the Bible Christian Church. But still, it was very, very difficult. I passed on at the age of 81 to be with our Lord. But I can now say that I can look back on a life well lived, traveled across the ocean to Chagrin, where my family grew roots and grew the town. My children and their families and beyond all contributed to the town we know and love today. Thank you.